Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show for Wednesday, December the 16th, 2020. I'll begin with a bit of housekeeping. I am leaving where I am now on Friday, so there will be no show on Friday, no book club this week. Tomorrow will be my last show until I don't know when exactly. I don't know how long the hiatus will be. I'll certainly make it as short as I can. So I'm moving somewhere on Friday. I don't know exactly where that will be. So fingers crossed, as they say. Hello to Emmett Kelly's Earth and William Hicks. There's so many things been happening lately. Everything is in such a rush. And yesterday I went to check my bank balance, and I was informed that the password didn't work anymore. Now, they require you to have very complicated passwords at financial institutions, and I can't possibly memorize them. And if I were to write it down somewhere, I would forget where I wrote it down. So my Brave browser remembers all my passwords for me. So I couldn't understand why I couldn't find out what my bank balance was. And so it was too late to call my credit union. But I went to the store a little bit later and found that my card was repeatedly declined. So I call up my financial institution this morning and find out that my account has been frozen. And why is that? Well, the bank card was due to expire in January, and apparently they had sent out a new card to my old address, which I did not get. So they'd taken the precaution of freezing my account. And so I went down to local branch of my financial institution, which is 2 blocks away, and it's just a completely absurd scene. There's a guard at the door, and he asked me if I have COVID, if I've left British Columbia within the last X number of days, do I have any symptoms of COVID? Have I been exposed to people who have COVID? And I said, no. So they let me in, and I'm standing at the line, and I notice that all of the customers, the clients, the rule is they have to be 4 feet away from the wicket. And there's one of those little, velvet rope things with the 2 ends forcing you. You stand on the red dot, and you have to be 4 feet away. So you have to lean over terribly to do anything. The woman in front of me was quite short, and she dropped a receipt, and she bent over and she nearly pulled the whole thing down. But it reminded me of that scene from A Clockwork Orange where Alex is admitted to the prison, and the prison guard, or the chief warder, is played by the great Michael Bates. And Alex saunters up to the desk, and Michael Bates screams at him, "Stand behind the red line." And it was just like that. So I go through all of this rigmarole, and they give me a new card. I was kind of expecting the woman at the counter to ask me my religion, and if I said C of E, would she scream at me, "Do you mean the Church of England?" But it wasn't quite as bad as that. Of course, I've been into many stores since the panic began in February, and I have, this was the highest level of fear that I've ever seen at any place that I've gone into. Buddy, Kevin, what happened to that green plaid jacket you used to wear? I don't know whether it's going to survive the trip. Chad Chadson, hello to our valiant moderator. When life gets crazy, KMG remains on time. Well, thank you for that. I do what I can. So let's get into it. I talked yesterday about Vox Day's site being difficult or impossible to get to because there was a red screen of death when you attempted to access his site. And I finally managed to get there, opening a private window in Tor. But then I find out that a bunch of browser companies, including Brave, which is the browser that I use and love, it had signed on to some sort of protocol so that when Google made a decision, this applied to Brave. And I sent an email to Brandon Ike saying, what's going on here? This is obviously bogus. And he replied saying that he would get back to me. And we find out that, it was some sort of an unfortunate glitch, Vox Day writes. Alas, poor SJW. It appears our Googler's ill-considered efforts have already been overturned by his superiors, and yet the evidence of his defamatory actions remains in our possession. Whatever shall we do? A question to ponder indeed as we await the unrelated outcome of Google's obvious labors in its infrastructure that have been affecting everything from YouTube to Gmail accounts. Update. Apparently those warnings about malware and information gathering apps was all just an accident or something, as this Google systems review, which usually takes several weeks, successfully concluded in record time. Google actually resolved this faster than Amazon did. Thanks very much to everyone who helped chronicle the full extent of this inexplicable and unfortunate software glitch. How very good of them to resolve the matter so speedily. I'm sure your appreciation, like mine, knows no bounds. So I'm going to talk now about the U.S. presidential election, and I will begin with my usual caveat that YouTube has determined that Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. he occupies the office of president-elect, and that he won the election fair and square. And so if that's Google's position, that is my position as well. However, President Donald Trump is disputing the election, and that to me constitutes major news because there's been nothing like this in the United States until since 1876. So I'm going to be reporting on this story. These are not my opinions. I'm merely quoting other people's opinions. I'm going to start with a video, which is the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, which is Carl Benjamin, who also goes by Sargon of Akkad, and he normally has a co-host, some sort or another. And he posted a video today, December 16th, called Something Big is Coming. And he notes that there's been very strange things happening with the internet lately, systems going down, perhaps evidence of hacking by foreign countries. And he talks about Trump's executive order of 2018, and that Trump appears to be building a case that the election was illegitimate. Of course, we know formally that it wasn't, but Trump feels differently. And let's see, Carl Benjamin was led to the opinion that Trump is planning something big, something shocking. Well, on Friday, the Director of National Intelligence will be releasing his report on whether there was foreign interference in the American election. And after we hear that, we will probably get a pretty good insight into what Trump's next step will be. So let's go to the president's Twitter account. What does he have to say today? Sarah Carter, who's a Fox News contributor, the host of the Sarah Carter Show, had quoted Senator Rand Paul, quote, "The fraud happened, the election in many ways was stolen," unquote. And Donald J. Trump commented on that, "True." And there's the warning underneath. His claim about election fraud is disputed. And Trump today posted a video boasting of his accomplishments, and then talking about what he believes to be evidence of irregularities. And of course, he includes the famous, notorious statement from Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. that, let me see if I can find it here exactly, that Biden had said at a press conference, yes, we have created the most extensive inclusive voter fraud organization in history. Of course, Joe Biden merely misspoke. 5 hours ago, Trump tweeted, Chris Krebs was totally excoriated and proven wrong at the Senate hearing on the fraudulent 2020 election. Massive fraud took place with machines, people voting from out of state, illegals, dead people, no signatures, and so much more. And of course, this claim about election fraud is disputed. He quoted former United States Solicitor General Ken Starr that Pennsylvania flagrantly violated laws ahead of election. Of course, that is the opinion of Donald Trump and Ken Starr. It's not my opinion. And 9 hours ago, he tweeted, perhaps the biggest difference between 2016 and 2020 is Fox News, despite the fact that I went from 63,000 votes to 75,000 votes, a record 12,000 vote increase. Obama went down 3,000 votes in 2012 and won, and then he makes a claim about election fraud that is, of course, disputed. And finally, can't believe how badly Fox News is doing in the ratings. They played right into the hands of the radical left Democrats and are now floating in limbo land, having fired Donna Brazile and far worse, allowing endless negative and unedited commercials. Fox News is dead. Really sad. So here's a story from Breitbart from Jeff Poor. On Monday, during an appearance on Fox Business Network's Lou Dobbs Tonight, Representative Mo Brooks, Republican of Alabama, vowed not to go down without a fight, despite states having certified electoral college results earlier in the day, which paved the way for Joe Biden to become the president-elect. Brooks told host Lou Dobbs about his effort to challenge the electoral college, which has happened as recently as 2017, after Donald Trump won the presidential election. It's happened many times in the past, Brooks said. Apparently, some folks have not done their history. By way of example, the Democrats in the House tried it in 2017 when they tried to strike Alabama's votes for Donald Trump. Georgia, the same way, the House Democrats tried to strike it. Barbara Boxer tried to strike Ohio for George Bush back in 2005, so this is not unusual. The law is very clear. The House of Representatives, in combination with the United States Senate, has the lawful authority to accept or reject electoral college vote submissions from states that have such flawed election systems that they're not worthy of our trust. He concluded, I have a choice. I can either sit back and surrender and be part of the surrender caucus, or I can fight for our country, and that's what I'm going to do. So on January the 6th, I'm going to object to the submissions of electoral college votes from various states that, in my judgment, have such flawed election systems that their vote counts are unworthy of our ratification in the United States Congress. What I need is a United States senator who will join me. If we have a House member and a senator, then by golly, that forces a House vote and a floor vote on whether to accept this systematically flawed election system or to reject it. I want to reject it so that we can have an honest and fair and accurate election. Again, Mo Brooks' opinion and not mine. Something from justthenews.com. President Trump on Wednesday responded to Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, saying that he acknowledges Joe Biden as the president-elect, telling McConnell it's too early to give up on the efforts to keep challenging the election results. Republican Party must finally learn to fight. People are angry, Trump tweeted. He also linked in the tweet to an article titled, Trump's Allies Slam Mitch McConnell for Congratulating Biden. McConnell, a Kentucky Republican, also said Tuesday the Electoral College results are determinative, a likely signal to fellow Senate Republicans not to challenge the results. Seems to me, based on what he said, that Senator Rand Paul could be the one senator that Mo Brooks is looking for. So let's do a roundup of election news. This is from USA Today. Former election security chief Christopher Krebs said he has not seen anything that would change his opinion that the 2020 election was secure and urged Republicans to call out baseless claims of widespread voter fraud. This is not the America I recognize. It's got to stop. We need everyone across the leadership ranks to stand up. Krebs said during testimony Wednesday before the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs, I would appreciate more support from my own party, the Republican Party, to call this stuff out and move on. We have to move on. Well, I don't know. Does Chris Krebs think he's going to get some good boy brownie points from the other side? Because the other side is talking and has been talking for months of outlawing the Republican Party and refusing to seat any Republicans who just Republicans because they're not patriots, because they made a fuss about the election. So if Chris Krebs thinks that he's going to ingratiate himself with these people, in my opinion, he is sorely mistaken. Mark Lansbaum writes in the American Thinker, the good news is it's still entirely possible for Donald Trump to be reelected. The bad news is that it's likely to come down to the rhinos. Joe Biden, in his cough-punctuated speech Monday night, declared victory and enumerated all the ways that he defeated Donald Trump. 7 million more votes, a landslide in electoral college votes, coupled with Trump's zero batting average in every courtroom to hear his case so far. Actually, that is not, in fact, true, because as far as I know, this figure 51 or whatever is brought up. The cases weren't heard. The courts decided not to hear the case because they believed that they did not have a jurisdiction, standing, as they say, or that the suits were improperly put together or whatnot. Lansbaum continues, but there is now also a hugely encouraging fact. On Monday, Trump won his most significant battle yet when 7 swing states sent pro-Trump electors to Washington. Now someone must decide whether to accept the Biden slate of electors for those states, which also were sent on Monday, or the Trump slates. That's because the electoral system as devised makes it impossibly to effectively challenge voting fraud. No court can process sufficiently and fairly all the evidence, claims, and counterclaims, testimony, etc. in the time between election day and the day electors are chosen. It takes about half the available time just to research and pull together cases and file them. Cases this complicated take months, even years, to be resolved in courts. No court was about to overturn a national election based on what are essentially only allegations in a lawsuit without testing the veracity in a full-blown trial, with the accused allowed to present their case and both sides engaging in cross-examination, discovery, and other requisite legal niceties to determine whether the allegations hold water. That just wasn't ever going to happen, certainly not by December 14th, when the Electoral College electors were sent to Washington. Trump's team has known this all along. If so, things probably are advancing pretty much according to Trump's plan. And not all deadlines are absolute, although the next two seem pretty hard and fast. January 6th, when Congress convenes to tally the Electoral College votes to declare a winner, and on January 20th to swear in a president. Should Biden emerge from January 6th as president-elect, January 20th is likely a done deal. Let's see. He writes that this campaign, the campaign of Trump and his supporters, has worked pretty well. Half the nation has persuaded the election was rigged. That wouldn't have happened with just mainstream press coverage and no lawsuits. In a real sense, power still lies with the people. We're about to find out how much power. Will evidence, filed affidavits, and expert testimony from all the lawsuits and the news coverage they generated be influential enough to nudge the Senate to recognize Trump's electors in the disputed states? We'll see. Should whatever happens end up before SCOTUS, we'll also see how the court of public opinion influences the robed guys and gals. Coughing Joe's declarations aside, no one is president-elect, at least until January 6th, when electors are tallied in Congress. Here's the rub. it's likely to come down to the rhinos. Should Senator Mitt Romney abandon the Republican cause and take enough rhinos with him, Trump can fail by his alternative electors not getting enough votes in the Senate. If so, the Never-Trumpers will have the final say. Again, I'm going to issue my objection to this term rhinos, which stands for Republicans in name only. Just call them Republicans. Because we saw after the election when Senator Mike Lee of Utah, who wants to flood America with Bindi H-1B applicants, voice vote, no objections. Not one Republican objected. It's as if they have learned nothing from Trump. And of course, by January 6th, it's entirely likely that any evidence that Trump believes that he has about foreign governments interfering in the presidential election will have been revealed. We still don't know what Trump has up his sleeve. Autry Pruitt, again, an American thinker, says as long as Republicans allow unreciprocated decency to stand in the way of victory, they will be losers forever. And right now, the leader of the losers is Attorney General William Barr. I'll have to mention that on that podcast that I was talking about with Carl Benjamin, he noted Barr's letter to Trump, his resignation letter, and he was rather shocked that it was just so gushing in its praise of Trump, a man who had publicly told the world of his disappointment with Barr, particularly in recent weeks, and especially about the knowledge that the FBI has been investigating Hunter Biden, who is the crackhead, incestuous grifter son of Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., the president-elect. 2 years, kept secret, could have influenced the election, right? Well, I mean, 2018 is 2 years from 2020. But the suspicion was, according to the podcast, was that Barr was letting Trump know that he just didn't have the stomach for this, that he was not, as they say in The Godfather, a wartime consigliere. So let's see what is next. Let's go to the chat and see if anything is happening there. Scroll up to the top. Chogokin 666, a healthcare professional security guard. Alex DeLarge says, I remember that. My number was 655321. Matt Forney says, this is like a trip into bizarro world. Nobody in my corner of the world cares about masks except in the most perfunctory way. Alex DeLarge says, Fox Day is too much of a boomer to implement HTTPS. Chocokin 666, they just censored a quote from Clockwork Orange. Oh, dear. Facile Goose says, I wonder if this wasn't a solar something tweak. Android text related to POTUS getting censored, but not on iPhones yet. Alex Forney asks, Alex DeLarge, it's a blogger blog. Can he even implement HTTPS? That's supposed to be Google's responsibility since they're the OST. William Hicks says, realize it may not be germane, but have recently discovered women's pole vaulting videos on YouTube. Some videos started showing up, checked out a few, and recommend. Those ladies are hot. Okay. It's been kind of a meme in my country for some years now for people who have no interest in curling to suddenly start watching curling. Curling is a particular Canadian fascination. I spent most of my life in Vancouver, and when I moved to Edmonton, I come into work on Monday, and everyone in the bullpen is carrying on about, did you see the curling yesterday? And I thought, are they trolling me? They must be trolling me. I've never in my life heard people carry on about watching curling on TV, but it turned out to be real. But the curling that has made fans of people who were heretofore not curling fans is women's curling, because a lot of these women curlers are very attractive indeed. Matt Forney says, honestly, I have no idea why Vox hasn't already moved to his own site already. Well, I mean, they've let him do what he wanted for all these years, so why move? Matt Forney says, I wouldn't host anything on Blogger or WordPress given this censoriousness. Okay, Namecheap charges like $5 a month, says Alex Delarge. Matt Forney says, I'm getting annoyed with plans and something big around the corner. Well, you know, if you've read Trump's The Art of the Deal or even read summaries, you know that he is very meticulous in his plans. And I think that what he is doing here is, I've said earlier, that he is dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's. Or as Tom Wolfe would say, I've tried A, I've tried B, I've tried C. So this doesn't come out of the blue. Facile Goose again says, Stuxnet on steroids is the biggest concern, and our greatest allies routinely liaise with the Red Celestials, hard and soft backdooring and such like. Hello, a glib medley. Okay, Donna Brazil was my fave, says Gamma Yun. I think he or she may be being ironic. Again, from Facile Goose, Starr and Dershowitz, standing the president has been odd. Justice for Seth Rich and Vince Foster in the cards. Now we find out that, the FBI has Seth Rich's laptop and has had it for, years? That's another strange thing to discover after the election. Hickma Warrior says, having chicken Alfredo calzone with Spanish green wine, blueberry yogurt for dessert. Is it real yogurt? I ask because I was kind of mystified when the yogurt craze started in the 1970s. Actually, it was memorably parodied on SCTV. That one of the things that was said about yogurt at the time, that people who eat yogurt in places like Armenia live, forever into their 110s, 120s, or whatever. But then I'd see people eating yogurt, and it was this gray goo with some sugar bomb on the bottom of syrup, and I thought that does not look either tasty or healthy. And once I was at a friend's house, and he made dinner, and his wife made the dessert. And it was a dessert that was based on yogurt. And I thought, ugh, I hate yogurt. And I thought, but I was raised polite. And so I thought, okay, I'll have a few spoonfuls of this, which I do. And I say to my friend, this is delicious. But why is it delicious? Yogurt is disgusting. And he said, because this is real yogurt. I said, real yogurt? Tell me more. And he says that the stuff that people buy in the stores typically is this low-fat version of yogurt. And so this is the real stuff. And I thought, well, life is full of surprises. Okay, let's scrolling down here to the bottom. Yogurt is the food of the gods, says Head McNeck. As I say, I quite like the real thing, but I have to be careful about it because I have a tendency to want to eat the whole carton at a sitting. Chocokin666 says, Dannon fruit on the bottom was great. Now it's all tiny pudding type stuff. Apparently, yogurt comes from Mongolia and was brought to Europe by the nomadic invasions. Head McNeck says, check out the Sprinter Girl from the No Tats Fasci vid. Okay, I will try to remember that. Hickma Warrior says, Khashoggi is supposed to be Khashoggi, which means illegal trader in Turkish. Head McNeck, I'm sitting in a bar in Oklahoma, maskless and smoking indoors. I love this state. It sounds like paradise. At least it does to me. Going outside to smoke. You're worried that they think that you're skipping out on your bill or something like that. And once I came back with a friend, and we found people sitting in our chairs and drinking our beer. Why are you sitting in our chairs and drinking our beers? And, we thought you'd left. You thought that we'd left 3/4 of a pitcher of beer on the table. Did you? Really? But, what am I going to do? Challenge them to a fight? Oh, no, terribly sorry, etc., etc. Art Bell says, plus September 2018 election executive order state of emergency is as if Team Trump anticipated election interference. Well, if you'd followed these stories about the Tradition Integrity Project, the tip from summer, nothing that's happened from the evening of November 3rd onwards has been a surprise. Not a surprise at all. And, just when you think you couldn't get any more cynical, then things happen and you find yourself becoming, more cynical. So let's get back to it here. And let's go to the Gateway Pundit. Boom, Maria Bartiromo, Intel source told me Trump did in fact win the election. It's up to the Supreme Court to take the cases and stop the clock. Maria Bartiromo has certainly turned out to be a brave and based woman. Oh, okay. This is what happens when you do a live show, that things you said get superseded in real time. Update. They're screwing Trump again. DNI notified by career intelligence officials that they will not meet December 18 deadline on foreign threats in 2020 election. How very convenient. This is from Jim Hoft. CBS correspondent Catherine Herridge reported Wednesday that DNI John Ratcliffe told CBS that there was foreign election interference by China, Iran, and Russia in November of this year. What did Ratcliffe say about election fraud and interference? Herridge says, DNI Ratcliffe leads the 17 intelligence agencies, and he has access to the most highly classified information that is held by the U.S. government. And he told CBS News that there was foreign interference by China, Iran, and Russia in November of this year, and he is anticipating a public report on those findings in January. Would this be after January 6th by any chance? Again, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. Won the election fair and square, and he occupies the office of president-elect. Just, put that out there one more time. The DNI Twitter page broke the news less than an hour ago. Amanda Schock, ODNI, Director of Strategic Communications, this afternoon, the DNI was notified by career intelligence officials that the executive community will not meet the December 18th deadline set by executive order in Congress to submit the IC's classified assessment on foreign threats to the 2020 election. The IC has received relevant reporting since the election, and a number of agencies have not finished coordinating on the product. And what's the third tweet? The DNI is committed to providing this report to our customers expeditiously. Customers? Is that what you call the commander-in-chief of the United States of America? Breaking, Nevada GOP electors cast ballot for Trump. There are now dueling electors in 3 states. I thought it was more than that. This must be an old story. And President Trump seeking special counsel to investigate Hunter Biden. And okay, so we'll move on from there to Breitbart. A survey majority of U.S. voters oppose globalist Great Reset initiative. Chinese state media, Joe Biden will fail to uproot Trump policies. AOC trashes Joe Biden's corporate revolving door team. It's horrible. Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson refuses to testify to legislative oversight committees. Golly, I wonder why that might be. And at the Citizen Free Press, oh, okay. This is interesting. Lynn Wood, the lawyer who is acting, not officially for Trump, but rather unofficially for Trump, tweeted, "I'm preparing a complaint seeking to enjoin and prevent the runoff from going forward on January the 5th. It makes no sense why Governor Brian Kemp, the Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan, and the Secretary of State would force Georgia voters to be subjected to same fraud using Dominion machines and fake mail ballots." Ah, okay. That is interesting. No question about that. And let's see if there's anything at the conservative treehouse. Even with vaccine rollout, Democrats still demand COVID-19 lockdowns into unknown future and ask the question, if there is no life benefit, then why get vaccinated? The story from Sundance at Conservative Treehouse. Amistad Project shares investigative report highlighting election manipulation funding from Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg. Press conference. Is it possible that, Zuckerberg decided to go all in? I mean, what is he afraid of? Is he terrified that if Trump does not leave office, bad things will happen to Facebook and to Zuckerberg himself? Could be. Could be. Video oath keepers refuse to recognize Biden as president will end up nullifying and resisting. As has been noted elsewhere, there seems to be a lot of open Fed posting, as they call it, going on. This is, that is an old story. And let's go to the latest here. It's outrageous that Joe Biden is even considering Disney's Bob Iger for ambassador to China. It sounds outrageous to me. This is from Emily Jashinsky at The Federalist. News that former Disney CEO Bob Iger is under consideration to serve as Joe Biden's Chinese ambassador is a concerning indication the president-elect's relationship with Beijing will be even worse than expected. Iger, currently the executive chairman of Disney, has collaborated closely with the Chinese government to produce and release films in the Middle Kingdom, a venture that ultimately makes him complicit in the country's mounting human rights abuses. Iger is exactly the wrong person to nominate for this position, which, by the way, is among the most important jobs in the world right now. He's qualified to negotiate with Beijing, but for all the wrong reasons: cozy ties, long relationships, and tolerance for the government's terrible conduct. In the midst of the NBA's blow-up with Beijing over the protests in Hong Kong, Iger declined to support the protesters, saying instead, quote, "What we learned in the last week, we've learned how complicated this is. The biggest learning from that is that caution is imperative. To take a position that could harm our company in some form would be a big mistake. I just don't believe it's something we should engage in a public manner," unquote. Iger, of course, never found things too complicated to speak out in favor of leftist causes. Disney's live-action Mulan remake, made under Iger's tenure, was filmed in Xinjiang, the province in which China is interring Uyghur Muslims on a mass scale. The movie thanked 8 government organizations in its credits, including one blacklisted by the U.S. government for its role in abusing the Uyghurs, indicating close collaboration. That's unacceptable. Iger's remarks about Hong Kong are demonstrative of a broader attitude rooted in the exchange system established between the American film industry and China. Okay. Oh, all right. This is from Jordan Davidson. Despite repeatedly insisting that Obama's intelligence agencies conducted no spying on Donald Trump's campaign, a claim contradicted by Inspector General reports, a 2-year special counsel probe, congressional inquiries, and continued investigation. Obama administration CIA Director John Brennan said that the CIA values honesty. Isn't John Brennan the fellow who lied under oath before Congress about spying on the Senate? Nothing happened to him. I wonder why they would be so afraid of him. When you go into the intelligence profession, there's also a premium put on honesty, which sounds a bit maybe ironic to some, given the CIA officers sometimes have to adopt false personas when they go overseas to recruit spies. Brennan told Tyler Cowen on a podcast episode of Conversations with Tyler. That's interesting, actually. What's the CIA's motto? It's inscribed on their building. The truth shall set you free. These people are professional liars, not just abroad, but at home as well. Despite this, Brennan insisted, but inside of the CIA family, there is a real need to make sure that people don't stray from the truth, because national security really hangs in the balance. Evidence suggests that the CIA under Brennan created the contacts and interactions that they then reported to the FBI as suspicious, thus prompting the FBI's crossfire hurricane surveillance and harassment of Trump campaign associates. Brennan also repeated lies he previously made to Congress that the Christopher Steele dossier did not affect the FBI and CIA's review of disproven collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. A report from Department of Justice Inspector General Michael Horowitz confirmed the former CIA director lied to Congress about this same claim. Tyler Cowen is a weird fellow, to be sure. No one's doubting his intelligence. Did he not duke it out with Brennan? Is there some sort of unspoken rule in the media that you are not allowed to disagree with John Brennan, even when he is telling porky pies? I find that fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. Let's see what Scott Adams has to say. Okay. Hypnotist reframing tip. If vaccination needles make you nervous, try reframing your thoughts about it from how much discomfort to how long the actual injection lasts. Okay. John Henry. He retweets John Henry. It's impossible to get away with rigging an election if this election was rigged by way of rigging 3 to 4 key swing state cities, as Republicans claim. Then this election would have produced a ton of data anomalies and irregularities. We would expect to see things like bellwether counties would suddenly stop being bellwether counties, despite decades of near 100% consistency. The rigged cities would produce implausibly high urban turnout, but demographically identical cities in neighboring battleground states would have normal urban turnout. You would have an implausibly high number of Biden-only ballots, no down ballot selections, but the same phenomenon would not be seen with Trump ballots. A forensic audit of the voting machines used in these cities would produce unexplainably high error rates, and the edit logs would be nowhere to be found. They would be wiped. You can see where this is going. He ends with a video of Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. Speaking, and comments, I'm just glad that I was alive to witness his greatness. So let's go to J5 Killer and see what we have there. He has remained steadfast throughout all this. Let's see if that continues to be the case. Oh, let's see. Activism had tweeted, Trump hasn't given up yet, so why should you? And Kiwi Bear commented, that's been my metric the whole time. When he quits, I'll quit. Until then, I happily soldier on. The New York Post had tweeted, journalist who traveled with Joe Biden to Georgia has COVID-19. J5 Keller comments, well, that's one way to concede the election. Yeah, Of course, Biden said that he merely had a cold, which, as I mentioned yesterday, is astonishing, because what we've learned in the United States in the last few weeks is that there's no such thing as the common cold and influenza anymore. It has disappeared. Vanity Fair had tweeted, Hunter Biden isn't letting the Department of Justice ruin his life. The one thing I have left is my art. And J5 Killer comments, and presumably millions of foreign dollars, unless, of course, he snorted it all. As someone else has pointed out, being an artist is I'm not suggesting in any way that this is the case, but being an artist is an excellent way to launder money, because pictures are worth whatever anyone wishes to pay for them. Someone aware me, how much money has Mitt Romney received from China? Carrie Kellerman had tweeted, someone signaled 5 states to stop counting at the same time on election night. Who ordered the code pause? And then breaking news, after listening to evidence admitted during hearing where he sits, Rand Paul says election was stolen. Oh, that's disputed, of course, because it is not true. And then the entire list of communists, members of the Communist Party working in Western countries, has been released and translated. And I think that we might get some interesting connections there. This is slightly off topic, but I suppose it leads to the next topic. This is from Robbie Soav at Reason. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, a Democrat, signed legislation on Tuesday prohibiting the sale of Confederate flags on public property, including at state and local fairs. Cuomo was well aware that such legislation is likely to fail a First Amendment test, but this did not deter him. He wrote, this country faces a pervasive, growing attitude of intolerance and hate, what I've referred to in the body politic as an American cancer. By limiting the display and sale of the Confederate flag, nasty swastika, and other symbols of hatred from being displayed and sold on state property, including the state fairgrounds, this will help safeguard New Yorkers from the fear-installing effects of these abhorrent symbols. Does this include the Hindu use of the swastika? Are they going to start banning Rudyard Kipling books now? Are they going to start banning texts in Hindi? Yes. Let's see. Donald Trump is mocked because his attempts to interfere with the election result, they were not heard by the courts because there was no standing. And Andrew Cuomo expects praise for legislation which he knows will not pass constitutional muster. What's wrong with this picture? And I'm going to talk about Latrine Wallace inadvertently blurting out the truth. But before I do, I'm going to go back to Chad Hickman Warrior says, Mitt does not sound like a virile name. Anglo names are often ridiculous. I can't remember what Mitt Romney's actual name is. Let me look it up here. Willard Mitt Romney. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so he didn't want to be called Willard, I guess because it makes one sound like a yokel. No offense intended. Mitt was some family friend or whatever. I've run into this in my life. That I used to work for a man called Link Byfield, and the joke was missing link. Get it? It turns out that was not, in fact, his Christian name, which was Eric. And I saw him sign checks, and he used his legal name, Eric L. Byfield. The L standing for Linkard, who was a friend of his mother and father. You know, it's nice to have friends, but, you know, why belabor your children with such unusual names? There was, an American cabinet secretary. It was a transportation under Obama. and he was called Jeh Johnson, Jeh. Apparently, this was some family friend again. Now, it's supposed to be pronounced Jay. Why not simply name your son Jay, and then if it comes up, you can say, well, actually, we named it for this fellow who spells his name Jeh, but is pronounced Jay. You can imagine going through your life when people call you Jeh. It's not Jeh, it's Jay. I mean, maybe you could have one of those stickers that you put on the breast of your jacket. My name is pronounced Jay. That would save a lot of time, wouldn't it? John S. says J5 is loyal to a fault, an honest and earnest dude. I'll take him over the legions of black pillars. Ricardo Williams says the Indians only changed their name for liberals. I just, the number of paused people in sports writing has become so great that everywhere I go, it's just, I just read this stuff and find myself saying inwardly or outwardly, oh, boo, groan, hiss. People referring to the Clevelands, not calling them by the names. The Indians, they did this with the Redskins. Are they going to force the Chicago Blackhawks to change their name? Because their logo is the most beautiful in all of sports. Ricardo Williams says, I will name my next son Jay after J5 Killer. William Hicks says, Willard was the captain who went up the river to terminate Colonel Kurtz's command. His name is Badass. There was a movie called Ben. Michael Jackson sang the song. It was about a rat. And then there was someone in it called Will. Where did I hear this story that people didn't want to be called Willard? Willard, yeah, they didn't want because the movie was popular at the time. Similarly, when this sort of overgrown vaudeville figure called Tiny Tim was popular in the 60s, I think people just stopped naming their children Timothy because for the fear that they would be called Tiny Tim. But eventually everyone forgot about Tiny Tim, despite the fact that he was famously married on The Tonight Show. Faisal Goose says, there are two of you, don't you see? One that kills and one that loves. Crispin Glover. Ricardo Williams, KMG, you taught me I was wrong about blackpilling. How confident are you of Trump staying in the White House now? Well, with each day that passes, I become more and more confident. Oh, I don't know. Let's say I'm 98% sure of this. Donald Trump can force the release of confidential documents whenever he likes. And if it comes down to the intelligence professionals simply not having enough time, I think that Trump could just corral a bunch of employees and say printers go, okay. Again, from Ricardo Williams, I was banned in the chat of John Boy Media for saying that I'll continue to use the name Redskins to refer to the Washington football team. I read that Johnny Unitas, the great quarterback of the 1960s and 70s, that when the Baltimore Colts moved secretly in the middle of the night to Indianapolis, that Johnny Unitas said, I want my name removed from your wall of fame, all the promotional materials, because I didn't play for the Indianapolis Colts. I played for the Baltimore Colts. By the way, there's a book by a fellow called David Harris. Yes, I know there's a lot of people named David Harris who writes books, but he wrote it about the NFL. This was several decades ago, but it's just one of the most fascinating books that I've ever read, because I had no idea how deeply weird so many of the owners were. For instance, Al Davis, who was the managing general partner of the Oakland or whatever Raiders, talking about his admiration for Hitler. Davis was Jewish. And I think his name was Gene Klein, who owned the San Diego Chargers. who was also Jewish, that he was being cross-examined in this antitrust suit brought by Al Davis about Al Davis. And he literally, he was in the witness stand, he literally had a heart attack and collapsed. That I guess that's one way to prevail, is simply to exhaust people to the point where you think, I don't want to keep it up with this guy because he will give me a heart attack. And it's not just a figure of speech. Oh yeah, Marge shot. I remember when that controversy happened, and I was a talk radio producer. And so I booked a segment about, this scandal about Marge shot and what her Nazi memorabilia. And I had put in my intro for the person that we were talking to that Marge Schott had inherited the Reds from her husband. So someone called up the show and said, actually, that's not true. Marge Schott inherited a chain of, car dealerships or gas stations from her husband, which she sold to buy the Cincinnati Reds. And I had this nagging feeling that I had got something wrong in my introduction. And then I heard the caller and I thought, this is not good. Well, see, this was before the internet. And, it's not like I could go to the library to check this out. I used to put stuff in introductions all the time in questions, which were based on my memory, which turns out is obviously not 100% correct. But my boss, the late Peter Weisbach, was convinced that I was 100% correct in every factual assertion that I made. And I knew that if I admitted to a single mistake, he wouldn't trust anything that I said in the future. So after the show, he says, did you hear that caller who said that you were wrong about Marge Schott? I said, yes, I heard that caller. He's wrong. He was wrong. I'm right. And my boss said, well, okay. You assure me that you're right. Let's see. What is this? Koga Pan says, late, just started at the beginning. Good luck with your move, KMG. I hate moving. Pace yourself and remember, something always goes wrong when moving. Embrace it. Love your show and all the best. Well, thank you so much. Yes, I've already, I have an electric razor, and I had left the charger plugged in to one of the bedrooms. And when all of the electrical cords were gathered together, and I was asked, are any of these yours? And I said, no, my cards are all at the computer, and I've got my my mobile phone and my e-reader charging. They're just over there. So I said, no, that's fine. And then I realized that I don't have the charger for my electric razor, which means I might have to buy a new one. That's one of the worst things about moving, is that there's all of this stuff that you have that you can't take with you, so you have to buy it all over again. William Hicks says Marge Schott's comments regarding Hitler were very close to John Keegan's in his book on World War II. Yeah, I have to admire Keegan's courage, because he has been assailed. He was assailed, for things that he'd written in his books, and he said that he stood by them. If you want your mind blown, says Head McNeck, look up Crispin Glover. What is it? I have looked it up. I have read it, and yeah, mind blown. I'm not going to repeat any of the charges that Crispin Glover makes in his speech, but you can look at it. Oh, Hitler repented in the bunker. No, I don't want to get into that, because I think that it's foolish, because, he did commit suicide, with a bullet through the brain. So Ian Chadwick, I don't know how it's pronounced, says, moving out of Cali myself, U-Haul called the other day and canceled my reservation because everything is booked for hundreds of miles. Che Plutarski said Peter Weisbach had some flaws, but all in all, he was one of the better radio hosts I'd heard. It was funny, because I worked with him in both Vancouver and Edmonton. And then when I went to San Diego in 1994 to work with him again, I was shocked by how much better he had become as a talk show host. I mean, he gave me my start in radio, and I'll always be grateful for that. He was a difficult man to work for, no question about it. I remember I was at, I mentioned Link Byfield. His father, Ted Byfield, who is, I believe, still alive, founded the Report family of magazines. And Ted used to invite me to his house all the time, which was very kind of him. He was always a very gracious host. And he had this big party on Boxing Day. Hundreds of people would be invited. But for year after year, I had to miss it because I was always working on production at the magazine. But one year I got to go. So there I am, and Ted Byfield is, he's introducing me around, and he's saying, this is Peter Weisbach's producer. And in effect, he was very gracious, saying, you know, this is the man behind the man. And I felt a little puffed up. And these people come over to me and say, so you work for Peter Weisbach? Yeah, I'm the producer of his show. So what's he really like? Okay. And I said, he is exactly as he appears on his radio show. But no, what's he really like? Am I supposed to say that he isn't an abrasive, a loudmouth, abrasive character? Well, that's what he was. Metal Mike says, any thoughts about Tom Cruise's Meltdown? I don't know what's up with that guy. Apparently, it has been confirmed. This was in Crazy Days and Nights for, what, weeks, months, that apparently Tom Cruise is insistent that this historic railway bridge in Poland be blown up for his movie. And he has run into so much opposition for this, and he just keeps pushing and pushing and pushing. Fessel Goose says, Cruise can't afford MI7 to be shut down by COOF commissioners. He owes back taxes to Xenu. Does it really work that way? Because there have been allegations that, shall we say, I have to be careful about this, unpaid labor from Scientology was involved in the construction of things for him. I don't know. He's, you know, I liked him from the beginning. And you notice that he's never been in, he's not like a Michael Caine who will just appear in any movie if you ask him to. He was always careful about his choices. And in that Bryan Singer movie about the July plot, he was terrible in that, but that's not his fault. You know, being a German Catholic aristocrat is simply not in his wheelhouse. But after that infamous interview on Oprah, it's like this is a different person. You know, there's an astounding rumor going around about Tom Cruise, and it's not a rumor that he's homosexual. Let's say, if you remember the Troy McClure episode where he marries one of Marge's sisters, then you'll know what I'm talking about. And I'll mention the story again that Risky Business, one of the fellows that was in Risky Business, the one who played Balky on that sitcom, said that he was talking to Tom Cruise one day, and Tom Cruise said that above all, he hated two things. Well, what are they? Homosexuals and ice cream. And I read that and I thought, who hates ice cream? Okay. Yes, I did talk about what Catherine Herridge had to say about the DNI. Halper said Hawkwind was great with Lemmy. They owned lots of land in the country. There was a recent doc of him living in a cluttered apartment in Hollywood. He was another celebrity who collected Nazi memorabilia. Steve says actor shouldn't be a career. There are probably lots of people who could act as well or better than these celebrities, but can't get into the industry because of entrenched career actors. You know, it depends. I was rewatching this show, Succession, on HBO, and I talked about that show when I was with Luke Ford, and I was particularly struck by the actor who plays Kendall Roy. And what's his name? Jeremy Strong? Yeah. I just bowled over by how good this man is. And just the range of character that he displays just in one man. Like everyone else, when he did that, self-written rap song about his father, L to the OG, I thought I was going to fall over. Like, what is happening here? Because, he was so sincere about it, and it was pretty good, actually. But let's talk about our Latrine Wallace. Let's see. At the conclusion of his keynote speech to colleagues attending the Harvard Global Health Institute's 2018 Outbreak Week, Dr. Anthony Fauci made a stunning truth in jest admission. I probably talked about this yesterday, but it leads to the second one, so you'll understand. In a follow-up Q&A, Fauci was asked about the relationship between allergies and infectious diseases. He explained that historically there has been a link between the immune response and infections. Well, duh. Then in an unguarded, rare moment of unintended disclosure, the director of the NIH's National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases added, quote, immunology grew out of infectious diseases, and I always joke with my co-institute directors that probably, sooner or later, every disease is going to turn out to be related to an infectious disease. Just kidding. That's just me wanting more money, unquote. And M. Catherine Evans comments on the American Thinker, coincidentally, Fauci's just kidding moment is now being played out in 2020, where medical experts, the media, and early Armageddon I'm not going to say that word, models have messaged COVID-19 as the mother of all diseases. I'm reminded that Tom Bethel used to, he's one of my favorite writers, and he used to write about diseases in a, shall we say, controversial way. In the 1970s, this hypothesis that viruses were the cause of all diseases, it became popular. And Bethel pointed out that God knows how many billions of dollars have been wasted chasing down the theory that cancer was caused by a virus. So let's go from the United States to Canada. While there may now be a needle to treat the coronavirus, this is Joe Warmington in the Toronto Sun, there's no vaccine that can cure the dangers of a hot mic or mask the embarrassment. This was an accidental blunder that's gone viral faster than the virus itself. Dr. David Williams, Ontario's Chief Medical Officer of Health, and Dr. Barbara Yaffe, Associate Chief Medical Officer of Health, have joined the list of countless others in and around microphones who know that when something goes public that wasn't meant to, it spreads on social media far and wide. Hence, a video moving around on Twitter of the two doctors bantering just before their news conference was to begin. What they didn't realize is the microphones were already turned on and their private conversation was anything but. I don't know why I bring all these papers. I never look at them, Yaffe teased. Williams talked about what is believed to be the COVID-19 numbers and asks, did she really say that? Yaffe chuckles and then says, I just say whatever they write down for me. They both laugh and it sounds like Williams agrees. What they didn't teach about microphone protocol in medical school, there's no isolation room to hide from a cat out of the bag moment. This was no longer a top secret conversation and there was no doctor-patient confidentiality here. Yaffe explained in a statement, my comments overheard on a live microphone before Monday's 3 p.m. COVID-19 media update were my bantering with Dr. Williams. I was referencing the fact that my communications team prepped me for these updates with researched and vetted remarks. Of course, I do speak freely and have no notes for responding to questions from the media. I was also reflecting to Dr. Williams on why I carry around extra paperwork, unquote. But independent member of the provincial parliament, Randy Hillier, said they were both caught on the mic just telling the actual truth, and that the they she referred to is the staff and party establishment everybody kowtows to. Yeah. One would think that was kind of a hard one to get out of. But yeah, they are literal gods who must be worshipped. And aren't they allowed a little bit of fun? Come on. Oh, a little bit of fun? How is it that when someone who is not a latrine walla decides to make a joke? Often these people lose their reputations, lose their livelihoods even, and are accursed. This is amusing. This is from studyfinds.org. For Americans working from home in 2020, it seems happy hour is starting a little earlier than usual. A new survey finds many people, this is not my mistake, this is just a misprint here, or nearly half of adults working remotely have secretly signed off early to have a drink. The survey polled 2,000 Americans, approximately 800 of whom are over 21 and working from home, to examine the bad habits people are picking up during lockdown and the impact it's having on their planning for the new year. 46% of those working from home have clocked out early to pour themselves a drink at least once during their time of quarantine. Another 45% of these respondents have even admittedly taken the liberty of having an alcoholic drink during the work day. So if 45% of people working from at home admit this, obviously the real number is significantly higher. As each day drags into the next, it's no surprise that 1 in 10 respondents working from home say it's getting harder and harder to get out of bed during the work week and often oversleep. This isn't an issue exclusive to those working from home either, as 32% of all respondents say they just aren't getting enough sleep during quarantine. I was that statistic, admits HOPWTR founder Nick Taranto in a statement. I found myself reaching for one too many IPAs, putting on weight and waking up hungover more days than I could justify. I wanted to break the habit, and when I couldn't find the healthy alternative to beer, I decided to create it. I wanted something that pays homage to my favorite IPA, but rather than leave me with a cloudy head that night and the next day actually clears the brain fog because it's packed with nootropics rather than booze. This fellow Nick Taranto seems to labor under the misconception that people drink beer because of the taste. Yes, I'm reminded, not for the first time, of Kingsley Amos's joke about the beer campaign that he would run, and the beer he made up was called Bowen's beer, and the tagline was, "It gets you drunk." Imagine putting together an IPA that has no alcohol in it. Earlier this year, well, was it? Yeah, very early this year, I broke down. There was a locally owned liquor store that was about a block away, and they had like hundreds of BC microbrews, and I kept seeing all these IPAs, and I thought, okay, I'll buy a couple. And I drank them, and it was something of a struggle because they tasted like cod liver oil, only hoppier. Not a fan. Not a fan. Because, beer used to be terrible tasting. And then there was competition from foreign countries. Standards were raised. We got independent producers in opposition to Anheuser-Busch and the like, and beer got much better tasting. And I just wonder if it was not, 10 years ago when some people said, beer has become just too good tasting. We have to make it taste awful again. And hence the IPA, India Pale Ale. Isn't the reason for its taste and the hoppiness that this beer was sent on long voyages for British sailors, soldiers, and the like in India? Isn't how this came about? Let's look at the panic headlines from the Drudge Report, aka the Panic Report. Record COVID death day 3,400. The town that doesn't believe in virus. Hospitals turn to desperate measures. Strict restrictions prompt defiance and anger in California. Fauci, I'm not seeing my kids for Christmas, and neither should you. Pompeo quarantine. Trump appointees describe crushing of CDC. Official demanded herd immunity. We want them infected. Unexplained gap in deaths appeared in Florida before election. Kansas mayor resigns over violent threats for mask mandate. Serious allergic reaction after Pfizer vax in Alaska. Supply issues hampering roll out. Okay. Mackenzie's gifts cast unflattering light on Bezos's COVID capitalism. And I'm looking at the pictures of them. And this Mackenzie Bezos woman looks extraordinarily good for her age. And not for the first time, I think. So Jeff Bezos dumped her for what a 50-year-old talking head newsreader who has been cut so many times by the plastic surgeon that she looks Chinese and has these ridiculous fake breasts. To this day, I just have to bemoan the lack of imagination of so many rich men. Yes, I don't want to talk anymore about Dr. Fauci. Let's move on to lockdown skeptics from Will Jones. Christmas canceled. And there's an amusing but depressing cartoon blower in the London Daily Telegraph. And one of the parts of the cartoon where there are three people and they're outside and what? Are they outside? Anyway, the blizzard is, rushing through the food and they're all wrapped up and it looks horrifying. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has written to Prime Minister Boris Johnson urging him to rethink the 5-day loosening of restrictions. Sky News reports in a letter to Johnson, Sir Keir said that while he understood that people want to spend time with their loved ones after an awful year, the situation has clearly taken a turn for the worse since the decision about Christmas was taken. It serves no one for politicians to ignore this fact, said the Labour leader. Well, as I pointed out some weeks ago, it doesn't make any sense. If the world is going to come to an end unless people isolate from each other, to say, yeah, that's still true, but for 5 days we're going to allow the most closeness that's been allowed in months. It simply makes no sense. And it seemed to me that it was always likely that Boris Johnson was going to surrender on this. In a rare joint editorial, the British Medical Journal and Health Service Journal said the government should reverse its rash decision to allow household mixing and instead extend the tiers over the 5-day Christmas period. They said this would bring numbers down in advance of a likely third wave. Again, I can't keep up with these waves. I thought we would have been on wave 4 now. Labour Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, joined the clamor for cancellation of Christmas. The inevitable quote from Professor Devi Sridhar appeared. Mixing at Christmas is a terrible idea. And that should be the message. Let's see. We don't want to criminalize people for coming together as family over Christmas, but it's important that people do the minimum that is possible. This is Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Steve Barclay. Barclay did add, though, that people will be making their own judgments, and Health Secretary Matt Hancock said no when asked if Christmas could be canceled. But haven't we heard that before? Apparently, Boris Johnson is adamant that Christmas won't be canceled, but he's been adamant about a lot of things that he has changed his mind about. Locking down London makes no sense. A skeptical stalwart Dr. John Lee penned a scorching piece in the Daily Mail yesterday criticizing the government for its ineffective authoritarian response to the virus, and in particular for its latest vandalism to the capital. No one can predict the number of people who will lose jobs, suffer poor mental health, or who will have life-saving operations postponed until too late. All we can say with any certainty is that all these things will happen, and not to a few isolated people. The harms caused by the new restrictions, like those caused by previous overreactions, will be immense. When Matt Hancock announced the latest restrictions yesterday, there was no mention of the fact that according to the latest data, On the government's online COVID tracker, the weekly average number of COVID deaths in the capital is just over a tenth of what it was at the peak in April. Nor did he highlight that weekly average COVID admissions to London's hospital are a quarter of what they were in the spring. Crucially, that disparity is equally large for the number of severely ill COVID patients using mechanical ventilation beds. What's missing, comments Will Jones, is a proper sense of proportion and a response targeted at the vulnerable. No plans for mass asymptomatic testing. In a letter from Lord Bessel to Bill Wigan MP, the government appears to have confirmed that it has abandoned plans to mass test everybody, whether or not they have symptoms. Jobs and livelihoods continue to be among the chief victims of this crisis as unemployment slumps upwards. According to Sky News, the latest job statistics show 819,000 fewer people in payroll employment since the start of the coronavirus in the UK, with the hospitality sector accounting for a third of that figure. Still, employment is holding up better than one might have expected, given the mammoth scale of the hit to the economy. The employment rate, according to Ross Clark in The Spectator, stands at 75.2%, 0.9% down on a year ago, and the unemployment rate is 4.9%, up 1.2. Still, this is pretty low by historic standards, 8% in 2011, 10% in 1993, and 12% in the early 1980s. Considering that the economy has shrunk by 8% this year, blowing previous recessions out of the water, employment has held up extraordinarily well, albeit at the cost of record government borrowing. Today's figures confirm how public sector employees have been able to sail through the crisis. Public sector employment was up 2.6% in the year to September, while it is down 1.5% in the private sector. No wonder there has been so little resistance in some quarters to lockdowns, even though they have devastated other industries. Well, I suspect that a great many small businessmen, particularly in the hospitality industry, are hanging on because they have been promised over and over again, oh, just this one more time, circuit break. We got to hammer the virus, and then, with the vaccine, and, eventually they'll decide to stop sending, throwing good money after bad, and they will close down their businesses. I'm really shocked that this has lasted as long in Britain as it has. Ofsted has released a report detailing another aspect of the huge collateral damage of lockdown, the welfare of children. The report, written following nearly 2,000 visits to education and social care providers during the autumn, finds that many children are thought to be at least 6 months behind where they should be, and the impact on children with special needs has been particularly severe. This treatment of vulnerable children in the UK in 2020 is almost unbelievable, particularly when you consider how little risk this virus poses to children. Inflating the COVID death statistic, I'm seeing, and I can hardly believe this. A girl looks at a mural by artist Rachel List, paying tribute to NHS staff battling the COVID-19 outbreak, painting on a wall in Pontefract, Northern England. And this nurse in the full garb with the mask is arranged in such as we would see a saint, an angel. In fact, she has wings and a halo over her head. Keep in mind, these are the people who have been proven unable to this day to stop infecting people in hospitals. Guy de la Bédoyère argued Monday and last week that COVID-19 was being overestimated as a cause of death. Put simply, his assertion is that if one subtracts deaths attributed to COVID-19 from weekly mortality totals, then the remaining non-COVID-19 deaths are improbably few compared with previous years. It follows that many COVID-19 deaths must really be deaths that would have occurred anyway. And again, I will point out, as I have before, that the average longevity of people who were put into long-term care facilities is 5 months. Let's see. Looking at the figures, it is immediately obvious that over 90% of the deaths among patients with COVID-19 are recorded as due to the virus. whereas over 90% of the deaths among patients with influenza or pneumonia are recorded with infection as contributory. And a pandemic of fear, the psychology of emotional contagion. Galina Gardner, who is a Master of Science student at the Arden School of Psychology, writes, in part, fear of coronavirus has led to extreme personal and governmental responses, from panic buying and social distancing to school closures and lockdown. In spring 2020, such measures appeared necessary. Their long-term effects, recession, neglected health, damaged education, were considered a price worth paying, though subsequent research indicates that the damage caused by lockdown may exceed that of COVID-19 itself. The impact of fear on society should not be underestimated. Studies have shown it to be the biggest predictor of compliance with new measures over and above moral or political leanings. Understanding fear, how and why it rips through society, is vital if we are to react proportionately to global events such as COVID-19. And then Will Jones goes on to write about Emeritus Professor Carl Saltzman, which I will be discussing in a separate segment of this show. And I'm going, just before I go to that, I'm going to look at what Alex Berenson has to say. Okay, here we go. Team Reality, please stop saying SARS-CoV-2 has a 99% survival rate. Worldwide, it's far closer to 99.9%. Big difference. Someone called Innovilt tweeted, in Moderna trial, there was one death due to suicide after second shot with the vaccine. I cannot elaborate due to privacy. However, it happened. I'm surprised that this event is not included in the reported data. Berenson comments, I think it's in the briefing document. I remember seeing it 21 days after the second dose. It was classified as unrelated to the vaccine, which seems reasonable unless there is strong evidence otherwise. So instead, the question is it possible to make any estimates from the number of grade 3 and 4 adverse events? Do other vaccine trials provide any clues? Does preclinical or animal data? This is truly a seeker's question. I'm hoping an expert might have an answer. And okay, he's talking about the safety of the virus in great detail. David Jurlink had tweeted, remember, if you are a healthy person under 40, get vaccinated when it's your turn. Your sore arm and fever will go away. Berenson comments, note, the good doctor is not disagreeing with my numbers. He can't. He knows they're right. He's just telling you to do what he says like a good little boy or girl. I'm going to guess that's not how he approaches other public health questions. By the way, can any epidemiologist, virologist, or vaccine specialist tell me what the risk of a fatal adverse event post-vaccination in healthy people under 40 might be based on the clinical trial data, even to a factor of 5 or 10? This is a serious non-trolling question. And I'm going to move on to my hero of the day, or hero of the week, or even longer period of time, Professor Carl Saltzman. But before that, let us have a look at the chat. Glib Medley says someone in New York should sell Confederate flag face mask. It's just, I suppose I've become a nerd, and you probably become a nerd too, to people routinely conflating the Confederate States of America with National Socialist Germany. It is it's infuriating and grossly ahistorical, but they're of a piece now, apparently. Hedming next says, is it wrong that I genuinely hope the elites push us to the point at which we can legitimately express our feelings in kinetic terms? I think it's close. I think it's close. I think that, in my country, they say they're going to use the military to vaccinate people. What, in the United States, the National Guard. So all of these people get vaccinated, and then we're told it doesn't make any difference. We don't know really how efficacious the virus is. You said it was like 99 point whatever percent. Well, yeah, but we don't, that's a clinical trial. We don't really know. We don't know how long it's going to last 4. So masks, social distancing, and all the rest of it for the foreseeable future. Fauci says probably to the third quarter of 2021, and others talking about 2022. I think that most people believe that when people have been vaccinated, then we can go back to normal. I don't think they understand that according to Fauci and Bill Gates and others, normal isn't coming back for quite some time, and we may never go back to normal. Chokokin 666 says, press 1 if you will risk the palsy. Brandon Smith, yes, the lockdowns will continue until morale improves. No, I think that, I believe I talked about yesterday about that restaurateur in, I believe, New York City, just flipping out at health inspectors, screaming at them, will you pay my rent? Are you going to pay my rent? I think that the situation in the United States certainly, and Britain, is close to blowing up. Galina is a Russian name, says Gamayun. Indeed. Facile Goose, physicians, the godless priest caste. The worst part is that no one will answer for this, says Gamayun. Again, I mentioned yesterday how the Arab Spring got started, and how it got started was a street vendor in Tunisia immolated himself, and suddenly the whole of North Africa is on fire. We see this throughout history, that things go off, often based on trivial pretexts. What we do know is the level of degradation in our society, coupled with the increasing totalitarianism that has gone further. I mean, there's not been mass murders or mass incarceration in prisons, but neither Hitler nor Stalin would have dared to institute the kind of lockdown measures that our democratically elected leaders have. DB Cooper says 2 years to flatten the kulaks. Yes, I like that. Head McNeck says, in these times, we basically have two choices, overindulgence or Spartan militarism. Glib Medley, they sell pint cans of some German beer for $1 at the Romanian deli. I buy a couple a week. They're maltier than I like, but that's okay since I don't want to overindulge. Katrina and the Second Waves. That's from Palcaso 88. Half Galician says, can't go wrong with the Becks. Well, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole here, but there was a long article, and I forget which magazine, about Beck's. And you notice that Beck's used to boast on its can that it was brewed according to the Bavarian purity standards of 15, 17 or whatever. That's no longer in the can because Beck's is no longer brewed to those standards. That Beck's is owned by Anheuser-Busch, which is owned by Brazilians. And people have complained that Beck's is terrible now, that Budweiser is much worse than it used to be, going all the, the one that they call wife beater in Britain, that Stella Artois. Stella Artois is just a commonplace beer in Europe, but in Britain and America, it's sold as a prestige beer, but it doesn't taste like a prestige beer. And Anheuser-Busch's management is simply interested in volume, sales volume. If people don't like their beers anymore, if they make the quality worse, Anheuser-Busch apparently doesn't care. The beer that I buy typically comes from Denmark or Holland, not Heineken. What's it called? 86, something like that. Also the Faxe from Denmark. It's kind of a mystery to me how you can buy beer from Denmark or Holland, which is significantly cheaper, stronger, and better tasting than Canadian beer, which might have been, on this side of the island, it's brewed in New Westminster, which is not very far away. So why is the Danish beer and the Dutch beer so much cheaper? Beer isn't nootropic, says Fossil Goose. Head McNeck says, I'm currently mildly inebriated and about to take a freezing weather motorcycle ride to get home. These times have certainly destroyed my risk-reward calculus. Oh dear. Disavow. Must disavow. Gamion says, KMG was tipsy last night. It's just hard to face all this shit sober. No denying it. I will neither confirm nor deny that. Fossil Goose, it's always Miller time. Somewhere. That to me is the greatest tagline in the history of advertising. It's Miller time. Conjures up so many, warm memories. I've never really understood people who could work and drink at the same time. It just, because, after I've had, say, 2 drinks or more, I don't really want to do any heavy thinking anymore because, it's Miller time. Let's see. Jules Roy says Stella isn't even close to being the biggest seller in Belgium, where it's from. Do you know why they call it wife beater in Britain? Because the tees, the T-shirts, the sleeveless T-shirts have the nickname wife beaters. And so since Stella Artois is associated with, chavs in Britain, it's been nicknamed wife beater. I find that very amusing. Ashy Bravo, are IPAs overrated? Well, I just explained a few minutes ago. To me, they taste like cod liver oil, only hoppier. Faxa Amber isn't bad, and it's only $2 in Ontario. Yeah. Yingling is Trump beer, says Rustin Shackelford. That is not something that I have seen on the shelves in British Columbia. Okay, Head McNeck makes a slur about the vice president-elect. Chokokin 666, German beer has a high purity standard, not being funny. No, I'm not being funny either. Yeah, someone mentions Doseki or Doseki, as people called it. There's people, I suppose, hipsters that I was friends with, and they were constantly carrying on about, Corona and Doseki. And I thought, does that come from Czechoslovakia or something? Doseki or Poland? Perhaps. Sapporo is good, says Chogokin 666. Yeah, I have no problem with Sapporo or Kirin. If I ever go to a sushi restaurant, well, that's definitely what I would buy. Kickball Warrior says alcohol is the drug of choice for the uptight. Rolling Rock from Pitts as well as Youngling. Rolling Rock, it occurred to me, how many people are buying this because of the green bottle? Yeah, Miller's comes in the clear bottle, right? So you can see the liquid. Of course, it's all changed in BC, but when I was growing up, or when I became old enough to drink beer, your choice was very limited, and it came in what is called stubbies, these ugly brown bottles that had a serious, habit of breaking, before you managed to get it out of the box. And I guess when they started letting American beers in, like Miller's, where you could, as I say, or Corona, which is Mexican, you could actually see the beer because you're supposed to be able to see what you're drinking. Jay Miller says craft beer snobs are a bunch of insufferable oafs. Yeah, I guess that's true. I guess that would include Rod Dreher. Would it not? Would it not include Rod Dreher? Because he's always boasting about his craft beer. including one from where? The same stuff that they drink on Red Letter Media in Milwaukee. Yeah. Let's see. Oh, yes, someone quoting me about what I said about Rod Dreher. Yes, and there's a lot of people on Twitter who really, really, really dislike Rod Dreher. I interviewed him once. He was very genial in a good interview. He was still a Catholic at that time. And I was writing a piece for the National Catholic Register. And I called him up. And I introduced myself. He says, "Oh, the National Catholic Register, are they talking to me now?" And I thought, what do I missed here? What's going on? The National Catholic Register took the view that the priestly sex scandals, the homosexual scandals, had been grossly inflated in their importance, and Rod Dreher took the other view. And of course, Dreher was right, but the National Catholic Register, they were campaigning against Dreher. So, yeah, there we have it. Let's see. Rod Dreher at the Pearly Gates, a fantasy. St. Peter, Rod, God would like a word with you. He wants to apologize for all the mean things he allowed you to suffer. Would you like a new Glarus? It's a special heavenly bottling made just for you. Rod, take that, Dad. And Ruthie. That was my own. That was my own little effort. There was another squib that I wrote about him, which I can't find. Rod Dreher wrote a whole book just to score points off his dead sister. Now who's the better Christian, eh? And his ceaseless status boasting is the equal of any narcissist thought on Instagram. Again, that is from me. I just... yes, let's see. They say that living well is the best revenge. In Rod Dreher's case, this means wittering on about his latest Apple toy and the $15 a bottle beer he drinks, crafted lovingly by Benedictine monks, the Benedict option. Get it? Okay, so Schlitz. I remember that from when I was a kid, and I remember, you can look this up. Apparently it's taught in schools, business schools, like the worst advertising campaigns in history. And the Schlitz campaign, that it was dubbed "Drink Schlitz or We'll Kill You." And the sales of Schlitz just tumble down, and Schlitz doesn't exist anymore. Jules Royce says, take it from a Belgian. Avoid all Dutch beer. Okay. Media Hit says, in my younger binge party nights, I drank the cheap Canadian whiskey like McMaster's and McAdams. I can't drink Canadian whiskey, or rye whiskey as they call it here. It's much too sweet. It's not, again, I don't drink spirits anymore, but if I were going to drink a spirit, it would be Scotch and not rye. Ashley Bravo says, J.F. Garepi drank a Canadian wine made from maple syrup on a stream. He did wine and food tasting. Drank a wine made from maple syrup, eh? Well, why was this done? To prove a point? Grosh always did taste like cannabis, says Chogokin666. I remember my father on occasion would drink this liqueur. I think it was called Glava. And it's a Scotch liqueur. It's a liqueur made from Scotch. And what on the label or whatever, it used to boast how this was the drink of Bonnie Prince Charlie. And I thought, yeah, well, maybe that explains why he lost. Yeah. You know, when Bonnie Prince Charlie was raised in Italy, and so when he arrived in Scotland, all of these stories about Flora MacDonald and him, well, Bonnie Prince Charlie was a gross, dissolute man exceedingly portly, and his Italian accent was so thick that no one could understand what he was saying. I much prefer his brother, Henry, who was a cardinal archbishop. And when his brother died, Henry had medals struck, which read, Henry IX, King of Britain and Ireland, not by the will of men, but by the grace of God. I quite like that. Charles, hello, Charles. I'm intrigued, Kevin, by the connection between the word pandemic and the demonic castle of pandemonium in Milton's work. I don't know anything about that, and I'll have to look it up. Jules Roy says craft beer people rightly look down on green and clear bottles. They lead to skunking when stored in warehouses between shipping. Well, that's true. But of course, if you're drinking locally brewed beer, I mean, it wouldn't be in a warehouse for very long, would it? Ashley Bravo says, are Canadian mass market beers better than American mass beers? I don't think so. There used to be a great variety of beers in Canada. Well, let's say a greater variety. But here's how it works. If you want to look at Canadian beers that are actually owned by Canadians, you have to go down to the 17th or 18th most popular, which is Moosehead beer from Newfoundland. Everything else, all the independents have been bought out by Molson's, which is no longer a Canadian company, and Labatt's, which is no longer a Canadian company, in fact, owned by Anheuser-Busch. Okay. I don't need booze to relax and have fun, says Hikmo Warrior. I used to hear this line, you don't need alcohol to have a good time, to which my response was always, but it helps. Meaty had some decent price, less than $30 port wines or Osborne, Coburn, Sandeman. I do like port, and I like dry sherry as well. But now we are going to talk about a fellow called Carl Saltzman, emeritus professor at McGill University in Montreal. Again, from Lockdown Skeptics last month, several student organizations at McGill in Montreal published an open letter asserting that the school, quote, is built on a history of oppression and that it owes its existence to the labor of enslaved and marginalized peoples. What, in Montreal? The groups asked the university to overhaul its statement on academic freedom so students and professors were prohibited from committing, quote, acts of rhetorical violence against marginalized communities that threaten the safety, security, and well-being of people of color, unquote. The letter also called for Emeritus Professor Philip Carl Saltzman to be stripped of his title and privileges because he's written articles about the Middle East and the BLM movement that allegedly make Muslims and people of color feel unsafe. In response, the Free Speech Union started a petition calling on McGill to affirm its commitment to academic free speech and assure Professor Saltzman that his emeritus professorship was not in jeopardy. Yesterday afternoon, Professor Christopher Manfredi, McGill's provost and vice principal, responded to the petition doing exactly what it asked. He has affirmed McGill's commitment to academic freedom and made it clear that Professor Carl Saltzman's status as an emeritus professor will not be revoked. And that happens so little because I don't think that I saw this reported in the Canadian media. Of course, there's lots of interesting and important stuff that happens that isn't reported in the Canadian media. November 30th, open letter demanding the overhaul of McGill's statement of academic freedom. What does it say? CW, Islamophobia, references to racism, sexism, xenophobia, sexual violence. We encourage you to prioritize your mental and emotional well-being as you choose how you want to engage with this statement. CW, content warning? Okay. Prioritize. I used to work for the Richmond School Board, just across the Fraser River from Vancouver. And the teachers held their Pro-D days there, their professional development days. And I remember walking down the hall and a bunch of these teachers were leaving the lesson. It was over. And this young librarian that I knew stated with great passion, I've just got to prioritize my teaching strategies. And I thought, what could that statement possibly mean? How many teaching strategies do you have? Or is it possible to have? Well, let's see, back to the demands. Scholars have abused their right of free speech and academic freedom to defend acts of rhetorical violence against marginalized communities on campus, shielding racist, sexist, and transphobic speech behind the term controversy. David Gilborn, a critical race theorist at the University of Birmingham, suggests that the terms of what is considered legitimate speech are dictated by, wait for it, whiteness. Boo! Since whiteness operates to invest speech with different degrees of legitimacy, such that already debunked racist beliefs can enjoy repeated public airings when they are lauded as scientific and rational by many white. Oh, it's white is capitalized, and so there's the sick, thus, after it. Listeners who simultaneously define as irrational, emotional, or exaggerated the opposing views of people of color. Moreover, evidence from psychology, social work, and medicine suggests that microaggressions, including racist, sexist, homophobic, or transphobic speech, have numerous and significant impacts on the health, well-being, and educational success of marginalized people. I'm just looking for a particular word. There's no use of the word racialized, as in racialized communities? Hey, come on, get it together, angry McGill students. What's their particular beef with Saltzman? In one recent example, Saltzman goes on to write that the Middle East is a place where doing harm and being cruel to others is regarded as a virtue and a duty. Saltzman goes on to condemn multiculturalism, immigration, gender parity, cultural equality, social justice, and the Black Lives Matter movement, along with dismissing the existence of rape culture and systemic racism. Despite their editorial nature, Saltzman's opinions are presented as though they are objective facts. Meanwhile, his affiliation with McGill lends him credibility that would not otherwise be afforded if not for his status as a professor emeritus of a respected institution, such as McGill. In providing such commentary while presenting himself as an affiliate of this university, Saltzman's recent publications in public fora demonstrate a lack of consideration for his responsibility as an academic. And so I looked him up on Wikipedia, and Philip Carl Saltzman was born in 1940, which means that he's 80 years old. And I suppose he took the view that I'm 80 years old. What can they do to me? Now, you'd be surprised how few 80 years old, people who are 80 or that thereabouts, actually understand, what can they do to me? Saltzman received his PhD from the University of Chicago in 1972. His thesis was called Adaptation and Change Among the Yaramadzai Baluk. He did field research among pastoral peoples, various in Iran, India, and Italy. He is a senior fellow of the Frontier Center for Public Policy, a Canadian think tank associated with free market and conservative political thought. He pursues change as part of social organization rather than extraneous to it. His book, Culture and Conflict in the Middle East, elucidates this approach, arguing that Western colonial influences are less important in explanations of change than the cultural and social dynamics of the region's societies. He writes, the Arab Middle East has remained largely a pre-modern society governed by clan relationships and violent coercion. People tend to trust only their relatives and then only relative to their degree of closeness. A pervasive cult of honor requires that people support their own groups violently if necessary when conflict arises. What is missing in the Arab Middle East are the cultural tools for building an inclusive and united states. David Price Jones, I believe, wrote a book called The Closed Circle, coming to similar conclusions. Actually, the Montreal Gazette published a piece, Opinion in Defense of Academic Freedom at McGill University, which I find, given the climate in the Canadian media, to be rather shocking. The authors, Samuel Vaissière, professor in the Department of Psychiatry at McGill, Julius Gray is a Montreal lawyer and former McGill law professor, and there are several co-signatories. Well, bravo to the Montreal Gazette. So, oh, this is interesting. This is very interesting to me, that I don't even know how I came across this, okay? Is this Planned Parenthood memo real? In this 1969 memo from a Planned Parenthood Vice President, Frederick Jaffe, outlining population-reducing strategies real? If real, is it significant, i.e. anything more than speculation on his part? Now, it's funny. I went looking for this and I found it. And I found out that it is real, okay? And it's a list of suggestions, okay? Memorandum to Bernard Berelson, President, Population Council, found in Activities Relevant to the Study of Population Policy for the U.S., 3/11/69, by Frederick S. Jaffe, Vice President of Planned Parenthood, World Population. Table 1, examples of proposed measures to reduce U.S. fertility by universality or selectivity of impact. And these include universal impact, selective impact depending on socioeconomic status, and measures predicated on existing motivation to prevent unwanted pregnancies, social constraints, economic deterrence, social controls. Here's some of the suggestions. Restructure family, postpone or avoid marriage, alter image of ideal family size. That's come true, hasn't it? Compulsory education of children. Presumably that means compulsory sexual education of children, and that has come true. Encourage increased homosexuality. That's come true as well, has it not? We're almost at the state in Anthony Burgess's 1961 dystopian novel, The Wanting Scene, where homosexuality is, well, if not compulsory, but close to it. Educate for family limitation. That's happening. Fertility control agents in water supply. No, that hasn't happened. Encourage women to work. Yes, indeed. And women who don't work, who are housewives, are often accused of being traitors to their sex and no less than traitors to the economy. I'm not making this up. Modify tax policies, a substantial marriage tax, child tax, tax married more than single, remove parents' tax exemption, additional taxes on parents with more than 1 or 2 children in school. Americans typically don't believe this when I tell them children are no longer tax deductible in Canada. The system has been changed where there's a series of grants. But no, unlike in the United States, you simply can't count your children and deducts X thousands of dollars per child. Eliminate paid maternity leave or benefits. Eliminate children's or family allowances. That has happened in Canada. Bonuses for delayed marriage and greater child spacing. Pensions for women of 45 with less than N children. Eliminate welfare payments after first 2 children. Chronic depression. Again, I'm not making this up. Require women to work and provide few child care facilities. Eliminate public finance, medical care, scholarships, housing, loans, and subsidies to families with more than N children. Compulsory abortion of out of wedlock pregnancies. It's not compulsory. It's certainly heavily encouraged. Compulsory sterilization of all who have 2 children, except for a few who would be allowed 3. Confine childbearing to only a limited number of adults. Stock certificate type permits for children. Housing policies. Discouragement of private home ownership. Stop awarding public housing based on family size. And then finally, payments to encourage sterilization, payments to encourage contraception, payments to encourage abortion and sterilization on demand. Well, that has come true. Allow certain contraceptives to be distributed non-medically. Well, that has certainly come true. Improve contraceptive technology. I thought that the pill was the high watermark there, and that was what, 1961? make contraception truly available and accessible to all. Well, that has come true. Improve maternal health care with family planning a core element. You know, obviously, when this came out in 1969, that people would have said it's obviously phony. This sounds like a sinister plot, but it's not phony. And one has to wonder at just how successful Planned Parenthood has been. Now, of course, it's not only Planned Parenthood that is advocating for things such as compulsory education, sexual education of children, and increased homosexuality. But I don't know, if you were a Planned Parenthood old-timer, I suppose you'd have to look back with a lot of pride, you know, that other organizations say they're influential, other organizations say they get things done, but what? Compare to us? And yeah, you can find this at JSTOR and U.S. Population Growth and Family Planning, a review of the literature from family planning perspectives in 1970, published by the Guttmacher Institute, which is the educational arm of Planned Parenthood. I came across this by accident because someone was saying that he had, you know, investigated so many conspiracies and that he was, you know, like knocked on his ass when he heard about this one. And again, wondered whether it was true. And I can confirm to you that, yes, it is indeed true. I was directed to this story in The Observer by John DeLillo. It is from October, late October. I found it rather shocking. Meet the Mandalorians, the internet community that adopts baby Yodas. When Linda Burney first saw a photo of the diminutive green creature, she wasn't sure what she was looking at. Its eyes were large and its ears were larger. It was clothed in what can only be described as a miniature burlap sack, and in videos, it wobbled from one place to another with a childlike stumble. Bernie may not have known what she was looking at, but she knew she was in love. I thought he was the most adorable creature I had ever seen, she said. It was late 2019, and the time the alien that the internet would dub Baby Yoda had just debuted on Disney's flagship Star Wars streaming series, The Mandalorian, returning to Disney Plus on October 30th. Bernie quickly sought the show out, and when Baby Yoda, known as the child in utero, appeared at the end of the first episode, a switch flipped. I was madly in love and became a Star Wars fan, Bernie said. Each and every episode was watched with the eagerness to see what this fantastic little creature was going to do next. When doll versions of the child hit store shelves in the United States, Bernie had a friend mail one to Australia. Soon she was dressing it in a panda-spotted onesie and had given it a name of her own, Wally, Colorado. So it turns out that this is an actual thing that, you know, we've heard of, you know, pit mommies and cat mommies. Now we have Baby Yoda mommies. And, you know, I was talking about Planned Parenthood and contraception, and I was thinking, okay, so these people fall in love with a toy or a cat or a dog. And I'm thinking, you know, when a human female gives birth to a human child, there is a very strong and reciprocal connection between the two, which are regulated by hormones that their bodies produce. It's science, people. No, but that's too boring, too expensive. And besides, we're all going to die, or there's too many people on the planet. Oh, really? Then why do we need to import all of these millions, tens of millions from Asia and the like if there's too many people in North America? You know, I don't expect them to be logical. I'm just, you know, reporting what they say. Let's have a final look at the chat. Let's see, Ashley Bravo, that is real serious cognitive dissonance. What would that be? Ashley Bravo, in one sense, they keep saying they oppose capitalism, elites owning ruling class, but then they completely espouse identity politics, diversity, globalist policies, basically every talking point at Davos. When I happen upon Bernie supporters, they sound a lot like right-wingers, says Gamma Yun. Ashley Bravo, very serious mainstream liberal political commentators have a very real fear of Jimmy Dore. They're saying he's a reactionary who is fueling right-wing populism. Is he one of these, what do they call them, trash leftists or garbage leftists or whatever? Glib Medley, any lefty who goes on Tucker's show is a crypto-fascist. Fossil Goose, eat the bugs, wear the mask, adopt the little green men. Ashley Bravo and Caleb Moppin uploaded a video today saying Jacobin, I don't know whether it must be Jacobin, magazine are fake leftists who are actually establishment bourgeois socialists. Josh Randall disavows says you haven't lived until you've cruised down the highway in a big rig with KMG streaming through your sound system. Again, thank you so much. Too kind. Too kind. Okay, that is it for today. The penultimate, as it were, show of the week. Because to repeat, there will be no show on Friday. And that's because Friday is moving day. I will be back on the air tomorrow with Theater Thursday, where I will be discussing John Wayne's 1948 film, Three Godfathers. And if you like the show or any part of it, I'd appreciate it if you click on the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not already done so. If you'd like to send a donation, which would be hugely appreciated at this time of flux and mutability and frankly stark terror in my life, my PayPal account is linked to Kevin_Grace at hotmail.com. Once again, Kevin_Grace at hotmail.com. If you have Interac, donations can be sent directly to kevingrace at shaw.ca. And I shall leave you with this, as always, in these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse. I do dearly wish that you, my dear readers, listeners, and viewers, find a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.